In the Blazor client-side application, you can call the web APIs using HTTP client service. Hello everyone, and welcome to another video on the ASP.NET Core Blazor for Beginners. I am Narendra Kumar Sharma, a Microsoft certified .NET trainer. In this video, we are going to look at calling a HTTP backend from a Blazor component. Whether you are developing a professional e-commerce platform or a personal blog, mastering HTTP API calls in Blazor is crucial for creating responsive and interactive web solutions. Let's check it out. With Blazor WebAssembly, you can do a lot of things on the client side without calling a web API. But often, you will still need to call a backend service from a Blazor component. For example, if you want to read data from a database like SQL Server. In JavaScript, you would do this with the Fetch API or with third-party libraries like Axios. But how do you do that in Blazor? I will show you in this video. I have prepared a simple sample project. It consists of a Blazor project, a class library project, and a web API project. The class library project has one class file named person with 3 properties: first name, last name, and date of birth. The web API project contains a person controller with 2 methods: a get method to load all existing persons and a post method to save a new person. The controller interacts with the person repository, but this is just a fake repository. It doesn't read from or write to a real database. In web API project, it is also important to register the person repository as a service. The Blazor application has the home page, which should render a table with data from a list of persons retrieved from the backend via GET request. The Add Person page displays a simple form to create a new person, which is sent to the backend to store the new person. Okay, let's extend this example a bit. So go back to Blazor web app project. It is important to register the HTTP client factory in program.cs. builder.services.add HTTP client first parameter is name. Let's name it web API. HTTP client set base address HTTP client dot base address new URI this is the URL of the web API. Save the changes. This add HTTP client extension method registers the necessary services with DI container. Now open home component. In home component, inject the HTTP client factory into this component. Add inject I HTTP client factory type client factory. Now in code block, override on initialized async method. On initialize async method. Call create client to get our new HTTP client instance. So where type client is equal to client factory dot create client, call create client, and pass the name of the service web API. We registered HTTP client with this name web API in program.cs. Await client dot get from JSON async list of person API endpoint name is person, the endpoint that we want to call from that web API is API person, and if it returns null, then return empty array and assign it to persons. So here this create client, we are calling create client to get a new HTTP client instance, and this get from JSON async, this extension method is used to send an HTTP GET request and automatically deserialize the JSON response body into a strong .NET object using the system.text.json, and that's it. Start the app and go to the browser. When we look at the page in the browser, we see the data we got from the backend. Now let's go to the add person component. Open add person component. Here I have a form with some input fields bound to the properties of the person object. Inject the HTTP client factory into the component. Use @inject HTTP client factory, type client factory. In code block, this supply parameter from form attribute and Blazor is used to automatically bind data from a submitted HTML form to a C# property in our component. It is useful for static server-side rendering scenarios. Here in on initialized, okay, we are initializing model if it is null. I have created a method that will be called when the form is submitted. When that happens, I want to call the post method from the backend. So here in submit method, create a client, get a new HTTP client instance, where client factory dot create client, web API, await client dot post as JSON async, person type. Here we want to call API person endpoint and pass model object. So here in this statement, we are calling create client to get a new HTTP client instance. Here the post as JSON async method is an extension method for HTTP client that sends a post request with an object automatically serialized as JSON. It will send the person object to the web API. So after the API call is finished, I want to redirect back to the home page. So at the top, inject navigation manager. Navigation manager. After the API call is finished, call navigation manager dot navigate to route. Redirect the user to the home page. Let's see if this works. Add person. Enter some values in the input fields. ABCD4. Press save. And we are redirected to the home page where we see this new entry. Perfect. So that is how HTTP requests work in Blazor. The other HTTP methods like put or delete or whatever work in the same way as shown in this example. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.